Good morning and welcome to Restore 2023. This morning we're in chapters 3 and 4 of the book of Esther, which is an amazing book. They say the name of God doesn't appear once, and that's true, but the finger of God is on every page. The book is set towards the end of the exile in Persia in the capital Susa, before Ezra's return to Jerusalem. The king is Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, who we know reigned from 486 to 465 BC. The heroes are two Jewish saints, Mordecai and Hadassah, or Esther, and their trust in God. Their tombs are still in Iran, most think in the city of Hamadan. And of course, it's the foundation of the Jewish festival of Purim, which is itself a Persian word. You remember the start of the story. The Jews are in exile, and the Persians are now in control. King Xerxes was not the most attractive chap. He liked to get drunk, and he liked his women, and when his wife refused to come and display herself to his drunken mates, she got expelled. And he instigated a drive to get new women into his harem. Enter a beautiful young Jewish woman called Hadassah in Hebrew, which means myrtle, a symbol used in the Old Testament here and there of God's peace. Look, for instance, in Zechariah 1. Her Persian name was Esther, probably meaning star or something similar, though she was an orphan. Mordecai had taken her in and brought her up and was her mentor and advisor. She gets noticed and taken into the king's harem. He thinks she's wonderful and makes her his wife. And she keeps quiet about her ethnicity and keeps in touch with Mordecai. There we come to chapters 3 or 4 and the mood darkens. There's the feeling of a coming storm. If the finger of God is discernible on each page, the finger of the evil one starts to be obvious too. Satan has a hatred of God's people, an antipathy that has not mellowed one iota over the centuries, and he tries to destroy the whole Jewish nation. What these chapters show is that God is way ahead of him, putting his men and women in place in advance, even though they themselves don't yet know it. How does the evil one start this kind of thing? Well, it's depressingly familiar. He chooses a narcissistic, arrogant man with no morals but his own self-advancement and helps him get into a position of prominence. Enter Haman. Haman captivates the king. He's well liked and becomes the king's confidant and friend. The king honors him and commands that everyone else honor him too, and they do. Who was he? Well, he's described here as an Agagite, which most people think is a reference to King Agag of the Amalekites, ancient enemies of the people of Israel. Josephus, a Jewish scholar, thinks this is the right interpretation, that Haman was indeed an Amalekite. You can look at Numbers 24 to see what they were like. I'm sure this was part of the reason Mordecai couldn't bring himself to bow to Haman. But I'm also pretty sure Mordecai, being a man who knew God, could see right through Haman and could see what he was like underneath. Well, the guards notice Mordecai won't bow to Haman. They don't quite know what to do, so go and ask Haman whether this is okay. And Haman, being the proud man that he is, explodes in anger. Mordecai has told the guards he's a Jew. Haman's response is to want to kill the whole Jewish race. You know, uncontrollable rages are a feature of many utterly evil men. Hitler, Stalin, Ivan the Terrible were all like that. Lenin had furious rages too. So did Haman. He goes to the king, slandering the Jews, and asks for his authority to annihilate them all. And the king agrees with his mate and friend, believes all that he says without checking, and gives him the authority as shown by the transfer of his signet ring to Haman. The king even turns down the bribe that Haman offers. Well, it looks as if evil has won. All done and dusted. Date set for the genocide. All of them, men, women, and children, and take all their goods. Proclaimed, notices up, all official, coming down the track. And Haman is superstitious. He has lots cast for the most auspicious day. The Persian word for a lot is puru, which is where the word Purim comes from. At the end of chapter 4, we have Haman and the king raising a glass together, as no doubt they often did. It also says the population of Susa said, "What?" Haman had reckoned without the Jews' God, who has his people always in his view. And God turns his people to prayer, because that's how God does things. Mordecai makes a loud public fuss. He tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth, and goes out into the streets, wailing loudly and bitterly. And the Jews of Susa follow his lead, fasting, putting on sackcloth, lying in ashes, expressing sadness and grief, yes, but also turning their eyes toward God. They have nowhere else to go. Esther hears about it. She asks Mordecai what is wrong. He tells her through one of her confidants and sends her a copy of the proclamation. She's appalled too. Mordecai looks her in the eyes and said, "Go into the king's presence and plead for us." Now Esther is shocked. To do that uninvited was a quick way to get killed. Surely she at least would be spared. Mordecai's faithful logic is unassailable. Don't think you'll escape. If you remain silent, God will indeed raise up someone else, but you and your family will be gone. Besides, how do you know whether God has put you there for such a time as this? You notice the mixture of God's sovereignty and faithfulness and personal responsibility. God makes it plain what needs to be done. This is presented to the person of God's choice. They are often scared stiff, but put their hand in God's, and what is impossible is done. And there are lots of examples like this, Gideon and Moses and many others. Esther rises to the occasion. Go and fast for me. And not just you, all the Jews in Susa. No food or drink for 3 days. And then I'll go into the king. And if I perish, I perish. This is Esther being the intercessor to God for her people and to the king, even if it means he kills her. So while the Persians feast and get drunk, God's people fast and pray. Quite a story, isn't it? God does indeed respond to his people fasting and praying. It's a tale of sleepless nights, royal robes, life and death moments, and trusting God. But that's next time. God bless you today.